Good afternoon and welcome to Break Time with Pastor V. I am Pastor V for Vince Holmes. I pastor at the wonderful church in Los Angeles, California called Zion Temple Community Church. It is a blessing to be here today, and I want to thank you for joining in. And as you join, don't forget to say hello and let us know where you're listening from. So say hello and let us know where you're listening from. And again, I just thank you for coming to check us out this afternoon. And the purpose of Break Time with Pastor V again is threefold. One, just to break the monotony of your day and cause you to refocus on God and the God that we serve. The second the second area of purpose for Break Time with Pastor V is to be an encouragement to you. And then the third thing is to have you be an encouragement to someone else, that you can share this. In fact, if you want to right now, go ahead and click the button, have a watch party, or share it when we're done. And today, as we talk, I want to share with you from Isaiah chapter 41. Isaiah 41. And we're going to look at the first 10 verses. And if I had to title it, I would title it Court is in Session. And it's good to see you all. See you, Sister Janisha and Charles and Teresa, Dawn. Good to see you as well. And here's what we're going to just kind of go a few verses at a time. I was so excited as I read this and got this sort of different perspective of seeing this. It's amazing how we read the same word over and over, and God keeps unfolding different areas of himself through it. And so in Psalm 41, I call this Court is in Session. God sort of holds a court, and he presents the evidence of who he is, and he compares it to those who are having false gods. And so in verse 1, he says, "Keep silence before me, O islands, and let the people renew their strength. Let them come near, then let them speak. Let us come near together to judgment." And so in verse 1 is where he calls court. He says, hey, shh, pay attention. We're getting ready to go to court. Let them come. Let the people come. And here's where we're going to have, when he talks about judgment, it's not that he's pronouncing judgment, but it's the idea that the evidence is going to be presented so that we can weigh it out. And so then he begins by asking a series of questions. And the first one, he says, who raised up the righteous man from the east, called him to his foot, gave the nations before him, and made him ruler over the kings? And he's talking about Abraham. He says, who called Abraham from the east? Now remember, Abraham came from a family of pagan people who did not worship God. And so he says, who called this righteous man? Who called this Abraham, declared him righteous, and then gave him as he went to a land he had never gone before, didn't know where he was going, but gave him land as he was going. Says, gave him as the dust of the sword, as driven stubble to his bow. He says, he pursued them, he passed safely, even by the way that he had not gone with his feet. If you look in the NIV, verse 3 says, and he pursues them and moves unscathed by the path his feet have not traveled before. And it's the idea that God took Abraham from humble beginnings, from nothing, and told him to go. He called him out from his people and then led him to a land, and he protected him all the way that he went. When he went without direction, he depended upon God. And then verse 4 says, and who hath wrought and done it, calling generations from the beginning. Who was from the very beginning calling generations? What's the answer? It's God, Jehovah, the God that is. He says, he answers, he says, I, the Lord, the first and with the last, I am he. If you look at your NIV version, it basically says the same thing. Is that the islands have seen the fear, and the ends of the earth tremble. They approached and came forward. Verse 5. Verse 4, when he says, who's done this thing and carried it through, calling forth generations from the beginning, I, the Lord, or I, Jehovah, the God that is. the first of them. I am the first and I am the last. I am he. So God says, I'm before everything. I'm at the end. Now, it's important that we go to this court session because God is proving a point here. He's going to just take this to this place. So he says, I called Abraham. He says, I protected Abraham. I am God from the very beginning, before anything began. And even I'm at the beginning and the end. And then he says, so verse 6, he says, then this is a response to God's charges or to God's declaration that he was from the beginning. And verse 6 is speaking of the people. And he says, they helped everyone, his neighbor, and everyone said to his brother, be of good courage. This was the response of ungodly men. Says they contributed, they got together, and he says, hey, be of good courage. We can do this. So the carpenter encouraged the goldsmith, and he that smootheth with the hammer, him smote the anvil, saying, it is ready for soldering. He fastened it with nails that it should be moved. Watch this. This is awesome. He says, hey, they got together. They got their resources. The goldsmith, the carpenter, it was three people. The carpenter encouraged the goldsmith, and the goldsmith melted the gold, and then he formed it and he hammered it with the anvil. And what are they doing? He says their response was to make a false god. They made a little god. And God is so funny. His idea is that he says they came together, they encouraged one another to build this God, this image, and he smites them by saying, and then they had to nail it down so it could not move, so it wouldn't fall over. Now, you got to see what's there by seeing what's not there. It's the whole idea of God saying, listen, their response was to make this false god out of gold. They melted it down. The people formed the God. Now remember, God's response was, I was in the beginning. I was at the end. These are the verses before. I called Abraham. In other words, God was existed before the people. But when he compares it in verse 7, it's the idea of them getting together. The people exist before the God. And so God says, and they had to nail it down. They had to put their God in place to keep him from falling over. And God is saying, hey, that's not me. No one created me. No one formed me. I've always been. And their God is so weak, they have to nail him down to keep him in place, to keep him from falling over. And your God says, hey, I don't fall over. No one nails me down to keep me anywhere because I'm everywhere at the same time. This is the God that we serve. And he says, so, but thou, verse 8, which is awesome. He says, but thou, Israel, are my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham, my friend. Watch this. He says, but thou, Israel. Now remember, Israel, the nation, is actually named after a person. The person that it was named after is Jacob. And so Jacob has this exchange with God, and where he has to admit who he is. He says, when he wrestles with the angel, God says, what's your name? And Jacob finally says, I'm Jacob, meaning I'm the liar, I'm the cheater, I'm the supplanter, I'm the deceptor. And then God says to him, you are no longer Jacob, but you are Israel. And so God says in verse 8, he says, look, but you, Israel, the converted one, are my servant, Jacob, whom I've chosen. In other words, God says, hey, look, I chose you while you were Jacob. I chose you while you were messed up. And the same thing God says to us. Listen, I didn't wait for you to get it together. Because I am at the beginning and the end at the same time. I'm a God who can't be knocked over. I can't be carried. I can't be formed. You can't create me because I've always been. I knew who you were. And just like Jacob, I called you when you were in your mess because I'm able to see the end at the beginning. And so he says, I've chosen you before anything else happened. He says, and you are the seed of Abraham, my friend, to whom I've taken from the ends of the earth. Verse 9, I've called thee from the chief men there, said unto thee, you are my servant. I have chosen you, watch this, and not cast thee away. So when we're stressed, God wants to remind us, one, who he is, And secondly, who you are. That he has chosen you, he has called you, and he knew what you were when he called you. And so the thing is, we don't qualify. God qualifies us. And I am so thankful for that. And it's not an excuse to live in sin, but it actually promotes us and gives us a desire to live in holiness, recognizing that God called us while we were messed up, but he changed our name, just from like Jacob to Israel. And he saw in him, and he now empowers us to be who he's called us to be. And so then he reminds them, in case you get twisted in this court session, God says, listen, I'm the one with the evidence. Consider the evidence. I'm the one who wasn't created. No one carried me. I don't have to be nailed down. I called you when you were all messed up. In verse 10, he says, so listen, stop tripping. Don't fear. Fear not. Why? Because I am with thee. The God that created it all, the God who called you, I am with you. And don't be dismayed. And the word dismayed is like, don't be confused. Don't be discouraged. It says don't be afraid and don't be discouraged, for I am thy God. And the word God there is the I am the God who's in control. I am the ruler. He says, and I will what? Strengthen you. In other words, I will give you my strength to do what I've called you to do. Not only that, but I will help you and I will sustain you with my right hand of righteousness. And the idea of the right hand is the strong side, that with my strong hand of righteousness, I will sustain you. So I want to encourage you, my brothers and sisters, here we go again. Just remember who it is that you serve. If you're in relationship with God, you're in relationship with the God in which there's no one greater than he is. There's no power stronger than him. He was at the beginning before the beginning began, and he was at the beginning and the end at the same time. That's your God. And your God says, hey, don't be afraid. I've got you. I will keep you. So you may be vacillating now, but know that if you trust him, he's got you. He will keep you. He will sustain you. And he's not bringing something to sustain you. He says, I am your strength. I am your keeper. I am your sustainer. And I will uphold you with my mighty right hand of righteousness. So be blessed, my brothers and sisters. Thank you for break time, for coming to break time with Pastor V. Be encouraged, and don't keep it to yourself. Encourage someone else. Share the message with others that they may be encouraged as well. God bless you. And remember, if you need prayer, just throw up the emoji for prayer, the hands together. And then secondly, if you are hungry or know someone who's hungry or needs food in the Southern California area, South LA specifically, go ahead and put food inside of the comment section, and we will reach out to them and make sure that it gets taken care of, or reach out to you to get the information. Alrighty, bless you. Have a great day. And remember, you don't have to be afraid because God's got you. Blessings to you.